So today for my Metacognitive Mechanics PowerPoint, we are going to be discussing the ever-complicated semicolon. There are a few pretty known rules for when you should use a semicolon in a sentence. The first would be separating items in a list that contain a comma. On our vacation, we visited Paris, France, London, England, and Madrid, Spain. Another would be combining two complete but related thoughts into one sentence. We visited Chicago in December. The roads were covered in snow. And finally, combining two independent thoughts with a conjunctive adverb. We wanted to stop for dinner on the way home. However, traffic was so bad, we decided to order in. I think that I personally struggle with the semicolon because I never quite figured out when to use a semicolon rather than a comma or a period within a sentence. Was I going to create a run-on sentence or combine thoughts that should really be separate? I was never fully sure. I also thought that semicolons were only used in fancy or complicated writing, so I avoided them a little bit. And mostly I chose to rework my sentences to use either a comma or a period and learn to avoid the use of a semicolon as much as possible, really because I was afraid to use one incorrectly and risk looking silly or unintelligent. The website that I linked in Module 1's Metacognitive Mechanics Forum is a blog post from grammarbook.com titled How to Punctuate Between Sentences Using Commas, Semicolons, and Colons. You'll see that linked below. This website discusses proper uses of commas, semicolons, and colons within a sentence, and it does a really good job of distinguishing between two ways that a sentence can be formatted and demonstrating which format would require which punctuation. So it kind of focuses on the ways that I would have created a sentence using a period or a comma rather than a semicolon, and shows me how similar sentences could be constructed with a semicolon. One first tip to overcome the fear of semicolons, the semicolon struggle, is to use a semicolon to connect to independent clauses. You can test this by splitting your sentence where you put the semicolon and making sure that both portions can stand on their own as a sentence. So correctly, Greg went to the grocery store. He had been out of milk for days. Both of those parts have a subject and a verb and could stand on their own. Needing to get milk, Greg went to the grocery store. Needing to get milk is an introduction to the rest of the sentence and cannot stand on its own, so that really should not be using a semicolon. Another tip is to use a semicolon if you use a transition between two related independent clauses. So once again, we want to be double checking that we can separate these thoughts into their own sentences rather than having portions that wouldn't be able to stand on their own. We went to Lake Tahoe in June. However, it was far too cold to go to the beach. You could also do, we went to Lake Tahoe in June. It was far too cold to go to the beach. Even though it sounds like it could be using a comma in this sentence, these two full thoughts connected by transition do need a semicolon because the comma would be connecting two full thoughts, and we want to make sure that the semicolon is doing that job. Another tip is to not use a semicolon if you use a coordinating conjunction. So, but, and, so, and the like. You could say, I have a paper to work on. I can't make it to your party. You shouldn't use a semicolon in, I have a paper to work on, so I can't make it to your party. Once again, we see here the test ability of seeing if these sentences can stand on their own. I have a paper to work on, and I can't make it to your party are both full sentences. I have a paper to work on, again, a complete sentence, so I can't make it to your party is not a complete sentence because it's missing vital information that the sentence should be conveying. Finally, use a semicolon to break up a sentence that already has too many commas. You might use a semicolon in, the assignment, though it was far from finished, was due on Tuesday. Mary still needed to write a conclusion, edit, and finalize citations. In our first example, we see the use of a semicolon because the first portion of the sentence has a parenthetical thought, though it was far from finished, between the commas. And in the second half of the sentence, we see Mary still needed to write a conclusion edit and finalize citations, the use of a list. So the semicolon divides those two parts of the sentence without leading to too many commas, like we would see in our second example, where the assignment, though it was far from finished, was due on Tuesday, and Mary still needed to write a conclusion, edit, and finalize citations. It kind of becomes a run-on in the way that we have multiple commas doing different jobs within the same sentence. Lastly, the biggest tip for overcoming semicolons is just to use them. Don't be afraid to use them. Don't be afraid to look up situations in which you can use them. And mostly, just be confident in your use of the semicolon and do not stray away. Thank you.